All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everybody. My name is Patrick Tallarico, and I am with the Office of Sustainability here at the City of Palm Springs. I'm joined by Chris Cunningham. Chris is going to be talking about some of the services and some of the containers that PSDS provides. And we are both here to answer your questions and to provide you with as much information as we are able. We are recording this session so that we can post it online for those people that could not attend today. I wanted to, you'll be able to find that on our website, www.yoursustainablecity.com in the future. And we'll work with Chris to post a link on their site as well. I really appreciate everybody joining us today. We had about 60 people that responded to the invite. And we've got 40 of you on right now, so we're excited to hear from you. And I'll continue to kind of monitor the participant room to allow people in periodically. So I might just glance at that every once in a while. And I think that's all I have. There also should be a scrolling caption at the bottom of your screen if that's helpful for you. So that's going to be available for you as well. And I think that's it. First thing I wanted to do was to see here. First thing I wanted to do is just to review the material that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about the types of multifamily properties, the current requirements that you have for recycling organics, the new requirements of SB 1383. Talk a little bit about temporary space waivers and contamination monitoring that's required under the new law, and also mentions self-hauling, composting, community composting as some other options for you guys to think about. So I think that is all I had for that. What I wanted to do first is just get a sense of who's in our virtual room here. So I do have a poll that I'd love for you guys to fill out. And it just asks you basically what type of facility or what type of property you have. So take a look at that. And if you could please just check the appropriate selection for you. And we'll just get a sense of who's in the room. All right. I think that's most people. Okay, so it looks like we have mostly folks from multifamily with common bins or containers, which I somewhat expected. We've also got a few folks on that have individual cart collection, as well as some smaller units out there, so some 4 or less. So we'll touch on each of those different types of scenarios to help you guys understand where you are and where we need you to be. Okay, so as we kind of indicated in the poll, there are 2 different types of residential properties. One is 5 or more units, and you guys are considered commercial properties, and you can have individual carts, shared bins, and you guys have been subject to current recycling and organics requirements, including AB 341 and 1826. So you've probably gotten letters from us in the past if you don't have service. And you guys have options with regard to de minimis exemptions and also space waivers, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. So if you generate a small quantity, you've had access to a de minimis exemption. If you're small complexes with 4 or less units, you're considered residential properties. And so you can have, again, individual carts, some shared bins, and you are currently only subject to current recycling requirements, so you don't fall into the commercial category. And you don't necessarily have access to the same exemptions and waivers as some of the larger folks do. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So those are the two basic types of facilities that we have here. Again, as you can see in the picture, on the top picture there is an example of one that's a fairly large residential property, lots of units, lots of a couple of shared bins. And then on the bottom there is a smaller residential property with less green space and maybe less access to a lot of room for their containers. So, all right. So for current requirements, commercial properties. So you guys have been subject to AB 341 and AB 826. And as I mentioned, if you generate more 4 cubic yards of trash per week, you've probably heard from us in terms of the fact that you would need to have recycling collected. And if you generate more than 2 cubic yards of trash per week and more than 1/2 cubic yard of organics per week, then you are also subject to organics collection right now. So generally, this has been focused on green waste collection. So there has not been a requirement under either of these laws for you to collect food waste, just focused on green waste. And so a lot of you have taken care of this through contracting with a landscaper to haul your landscape waste away. And hopefully you are retaining records of that green waste recycled if it's not collected by PSDS. So this is a really important requirement that we've been trying to communicate to make sure that you guys understand, as the owners or managers of the property, it's you that we're going to come and visit and ask you for those records. So again, if you've got green waste collection that's taken care of by your gardener currently, please do make sure that you're getting those weigh tickets, dump tickets as part of their service to you, because in the future, this is going to be a lot more important as we do enforcement of this. Again, as I mentioned, there is no food waste collection requirement for these types of properties right now, your larger commercial multifamily dwellings. And services should be right-sized to accommodate the material stream. So we've been out visiting a lot of you who need to comply with this and evaluating your sites and try to work with you to figure out how we can fit the appropriate amount of bins or containers at your property. So, so that's where we are now. For the residential properties, the smaller properties, you are required to subscribe to recycling and waste management services like all of the other residents in town. There is no waste generation threshold and no de minimis threshold. You just need to have that service. Green waste collection is optional for you, just like it is for residential customers now. And then there is no food waste requirement either. So SB 1383 is a new state law and regulation that we are working to comply with. And so I wanted to give you some background on that law so that you know where some of this stuff is coming from. So SB 1383 is an organics management law, and it's designed to reduce emissions of short-lived climate pollutants from various sectors, especially landfills. And so it's designed to really reduce the amount of organic material that is going to landfill. And the state has set a couple of goals, so 50% reduction by 2020 and 75% reduction by 2025. In general, this law takes effect January 1st of next year. We are, again, in the process of gearing up for it from an infrastructure perspective. So we'll be rolling things out, especially on the residential sector, as we get trucks and containers. But the main thing I wanted to convey here is that these are state requirements that we're trying to roll out and trying to implement here locally. There are broader state goals associated with this, and so they are taking it very seriously in terms of the kinds of things that they are requiring of jurisdictions like ours to help people comply. So why is it important? Well, about 30% they estimate of landfill waste is food related or organic related. And so that includes a big portion of the waste that's going to landfill, and that landfill waste produces methane, which is a short-lived climate pollutant and one of the biggest culprits for climate change that we have. And so it's really, really important that we focus attention on this and keep that material out of landfills. So that's really what's driving a lot of this. What do we mean by organics? We did a survey back in the spring of residents and asked them about kind of what they thought about organics management. And we realized that not everybody knew what organics were. And so when we say organics, we're not talking about organic produce like you find in the supermarket. We are talking about things like food scraps, food soiled paper, and yard trimming. So all of those things, a lot of places talk about if it grows, then it's considered organic. So again, all of those kinds of things would qualify as organic material. And all of those things are covered somehow or another in SB 1383. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how SB 1383 affects you and your property. So I wanted to start by quantity generation. So the biggest thing, or one of the things that SB 1383 changed was the de minimis threshold that requires facilities to comply. So before I mentioned that there was a ½ cubic yard threshold of generation of organic material per week, that equates to about 100 gallons. And you can see here, if these are 5-gallon buckets, we're going from about 20 of those a week down to about 4 a week, or 5 a week. I'm sorry, I didn't do my math. 4 a week. So, so we have a much smaller quantity of generation per week, which means that the universe of people that need to comply with this is larger. So again, think about this in terms of your own properties. You know, if you've got more than about, I don't know, about 20 tenants, they're probably generating about this much per week. And so it's important to think about that as we go forward in terms of what your property is and what it generates. And this includes both organic waste, both types of organic waste, so the green waste and the food waste. So please keep that in mind as we go forward. And you may want to do some thinking about your property and whether or not this new threshold might trigger a compliance requirement for you if you were maybe exempt before. If you were not exempt under that de minimis requirement before, then you still have to comply. So the other requirement that is new for 1383 is, again, the requirement to collect food waste. So for the larger commercial properties, commercial sized properties, again, food waste was previously excluded from those requirements. And for residential properties, now all residents have to be provided with this service. You have to make room for carts or bins at your property. Even if you were contracting with a landscaper before to take away your green waste, you have to now think about how you're going to accommodate the food waste portion of that waste stream. And one of the most important things I want to try to get across today is that the size of your trash enclosure is not your limiting factor, and it should not be your limiting factor. We need to think about ways that you can accommodate all three of those streams, so trash, organics, and recycling. And a temporary space waiver may be an option for you, and we'll talk more about what that means and what that is in just a minute. So again, one of the really important things, and one of the things that we find when we go out in the field and meet with people, is a lot of people look at their trash enclosures that have been probably were built when their building was built, which may be quite some time ago, and say that they don't have space for anything new. And so sometimes we're able to go out there and look at their enclosure and see that there is in fact some room in their existing enclosure to accommodate, say, for example, recycling. And in other cases, there isn't a lot of room inside their enclosure, but they may have room in other parts of their property. So we really want you guys to think about planning for future expansion. So if your trash enclosure is pretty tight right now, think about how you might make some changes to that to accommodate the new bins. Also think about right-sizing your service. One of the things we try to do when Chris and I and others from our organizations go out to visit properties is to take a look at what's inside your trash bins and note that, in fact, a lot of that stuff is either recyclable or perhaps organic. So really it's perhaps a redistribution of some of the materials that you have, which may mean that you can downsize some of your trash bins and get some other types of bins in there. So the other thing to keep in mind as we talk through this stuff is keep recycling your green waste, right? So if you've got your landscaper taking care of it now, be sure to gather those dump tickets. Make sure that they are taking it to the right place. It's not going to a landfill. It's actually going to a organic processing facility. Keep them on hand for inspection. And if you need to, if you're not comfortable with what they're doing, you can always feel free to move to PSDS as a potential collector of that waste. And so add another bin to your property if that's possible. So think about that. But again, this green waste requirement, management requirement continues on. So if you're a property that's been doing this and you've got a landscaper on board to help you with this, then that will continue. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the temporary space waiver. And this is something that we have, I think, granted in the past fairly informally, but we're going to need to do this in a very well-documented way moving forward. So the state is going to be expecting us as the city and as Palm Springs Disposal to make sure that we have records on file for everybody to determine whether or not they're in compliance, whether or not they've gotten a waiver. So you'll have to have one of these issued to you. Don't just assume because you've asked for one that you've got one. So we'll have an application form and we'll go through what that might look like. Actually, we haven't quite developed it yet, so we'll have that for you at a later date, but we'll be sure to get you a form that requests a waiver, and then we'll give you a waiver in return. So again, they're not necessarily based on the size of your trash enclosure. What we do is we come out and look at your whole property. We were out at one a couple of weeks ago, which was a really good example. They had a trash enclosure that fit pretty much just a trash bin. They had been collecting some recyclables outside of that. So we're gonna put some recycling bins just outside of that enclosure. It is still shielded from public view, but it's just outside of their current trash enclosure. And they've gotten a little extra room there too for potentially organics down the road. So the temporary waivers, temporary space waivers, CalRecycle, which is the state agency which governs all of this, has come out with some more clarification on what a space waiver is. Before, it was just a very general thing that cities used to issue to property owners to say, yeah, you don't have any space, don't worry about it. Well, they've come back to clarify that these are very much temporary waivers. So the maximum number of years for a waiver is 5 years. But what we plan to do is issue one-year waivers to allow you time, if you need to make any changes to your property, that you can do that. So again, the intent here is that it is temporary. And so it is an opportunity for you to make some changes at your site and give you some time to do that. It is not just a blanket exemption that you don't have to comply. Now, for those of you that really don't have any space to work with, we have a few restaurants in town that are like that really don't have any space to expand. You'll get a 5-year waiver, and we'll take a look 5 years down the road and see if anything has changed. But those are the folks that are unlikely to have many opportunities to make changes. So again, typically we'll issue a 1-year waiver if you need some time to make some changes to your property, and then a 5-year maximum for those folks that really don't have a lot of room to work with. Again, the trash enclosures have to accommodate all 3 waste types. And we're trying to update our trash enclosure guidance for new trash enclosures that are built. There are going to be some additional changes, most likely in the area of coverage for those trash enclosures from a stormwater perspective, but those aren't final yet. So we're going to be focused on making sure that those enclosures accommodate the 3 different waste streams. I really encourage you to contact Palm Springs Disposal Services if you want somebody to come out and take a look at your site and give you some ideas. There's things that they can do with different container sizes and types that may be helpful for you. So again, we encourage you to do that. So these are a few pictures that PSDS provided with some examples of folks that may need temporary space waivers. The one on I'm going to come back to the one on the left, but the one in the middle is pretty typical of some of the things that we see. We see a large trash enclosure that's surrounded by pretty permanent walls. And so this is often what we see when we come out to places. Again, we would have to take a look at the rest of your property to see what the rest of your property is like and see if there's other opportunities to expand there. Same thing with the one on the right. You guys have more of a, I would say, I guess, a less permanent enclosure there. And so we would work with you to figure out how we might change that or adjust that, or look at other places where we might add another one of these to see if there's an appropriate place for them. And then the one on the left is an example of a multifamily property that really has very, very limited space per unit. So these folks get individual trash collection and recycling collection. As you can see here, they're to the point where they're putting bags kind of inside their wall, inside their property there. And so these are the kinds of folks that might be able to take advantage of a small organic pail collection. So we're going to try to be offering a 2.5 gallon container to properties like this that you can store inside of a closet or something like that to keep it out of the way. And so we will have a small container option for some of the properties that are space constrained and have individual collection. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and talk a little bit more about containers and services and contamination monitoring, which again is going to be an important thing for us going forward. Chris.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Thanks everyone for joining. We're going to talk containers right now, contamination and monitoring, things like that. We know there's some unique situations in Palm Springs, so contacting us to have us come out to your location if you think it fits a unique criteria or just need some general questions answered and some direction, just please let us know. So we'll just get right into container sizes. These are just a few examples. As I said, and Patrick said, there's unique spots out here. So we offer a variety of different sizes of collection carts. On the left-hand side, you'll see the picture of a couple different sizes. Now we have 3 different sizes: the 32 gallon, the 65 gallon, and the 96 gallon. The 32 gallons, very popular in Palm Springs, just because we have a lot of tight places. I mean, even some of the condo complexes have tight garages and they need that smaller footprint. So they're popular in some of those places. And then we obviously offer the other 2 just as convenience if you have a larger spot. The same goes for the dumpsters. A lot of communities out there that have the centrally located dumpster service have the option of doing carts or dumpsters, but this seems to be an easier approach. But we do offer 2-yard, 3-yard, and 4-yard sizes of the dumpsters as well for trash, organics, and recycling. So it's all sizes, all waste streams. So you can move on to the next one. that moving?
Yeah, it's on the next slide,
Oh, it is.
I think. Did it not come through?
Not come through.
Can you see that one?
Nope, I'm stuck over here.
Ah. Let me see.
Which one was the next slide?
The next one was the 3 containers, the colors.
Oh, yeah. I'll just go ahead and talk about that. Hopefully everyone else can see it. I must be stuck on my side, but yeah, one thing that the state requires now throughout the entire state is this mandate is universal colors, right? So they don't want to see different colors for different cities. They want to see blue for recycling, gray or black for trash. And is everyone not being able to see this?
Right. I think it's really strange. The Zoom has frozen.
Oh,
So no, I can't even access any of my controls. So we're just what I'm gonna do.
you want to go with questions so far?
I'm going to try to stop my share. There you go. All right. So I think folks can see you, Chris. So why don't we just talk through the last few slides and then we'll go to questions.
Okay, so can they see your slides?
They cannot see my slides. So those
we're just going to go ahead and.
So yeah, so just talk about the 3 different colors and then we'll talk about contamination monitoring. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about composting. So.
Got it. Okay. So as long as you can see me, I'm going to talk here for a little while just to go over some of those other parts of the other requirements of the mandate. So the universal colors, blue for recycling, obviously we're good there. Green for organics, we're good there, but gray or black is going to be trash. So obviously that's going to need to change. We have these brown containers and these mauve colored dumpsters throughout the city. So we've already started changing colors. We started ordering those. We started to paint our dumpsters some of the gray colors. So you're going to see these different colors around the city here for a little while. But the good news is the state's giving us they're giving us about 15 years to make that full change out. Because obviously you don't want to throw away carts that still have a useful life or beds that are still decent. Another requirement is labeling requirement. So on each of those containers, we're going to need to label them, right? So the new containers that we get will have a hot stamp on them. You'll see what can go in it, what cannot go into it, both in English and Spanish, and there'll be pictures on them for all 3 of the waste streams. That'll help everyone out. I know it's not a magic bullet, but at least it gives something, but it's also a requirement. So let's talk a little bit about contamination monitoring. I think that's what was next, and audits. Okay, a major piece of this regulation, it may sound a bit intrusive, but it's a requirement, is the waste audits and route reviews. So basically, we're going to staff some new people, what we're going to call recycling ambassadors. And what we're supposed to be doing, what we're required to do, is randomly go through containers, all 3 containers. And if there are contaminants in those containers, then we need to reach out, we need to educate with either some reading material or any other way to help mitigate that contamination issue. We're also going to be required to do some audits, which means we're going to have to sift through trash from a couple of our routes to see what the contamination levels are and see where we need to improve. as intrusive as it sounds, it does help get us to the goal, which is to cut down on landfill and get these materials where they need to go.
And so you'll have to imagine if for a moment that we have amazing pictures of contamination. So we've got a couple of pictures of green waste mixed in with trash. And we find this a lot, speaking from my own personal experience, having lived in an apartment complex, in the apartment complexes and some of the other multifamily units where when the landscapers get more stuff than they can take, then some of that material ends up in the trash. And so there was an amazing picture of some palm fronds inside the trash bin. And then we have another picture of trash in the recycling. And this is something that has been a constant struggle for us. And we've been trying to get messaging out there about the proper things to recycle. And so one of the biggest things is plastic bags in the recycling. People think that plastic bags are recyclable and they are not. They also use them quite frequently, especially in multifamily settings, to gather up their recyclable material and put them in the bin. So again, we encourage folks to not do that. And again, that would be a sign of contamination that we would be looking for in those reviews.
And if I can add also that we'll be working on a lot of education. There'll be a lot of reading material, a lot of information you can pass out to the residents of your multifamily dwellings or condo communities. So look for that as well. We'll make sure we get enough material out to you.
Right. So the last thing we wanted to mention was composting. And so at-home composting is allowed. So for residential properties, especially if folks want to do that themselves, they can do that. It does not necessarily exempt you from the requirement to have service, but again, at-home composting is allowed, and certainly that's something good to do. It can be a useful resource for you in your own garden and in your own property. Also, donations to community composting is another opportunity for folks to donate their organic material and get it to someplace that's going to have a good use for it. And we're working with Desert Community Composting right now to identify some locations here in town to potentially have community composting site available for people to use. And so those could be opportunities for you. If you are more of a commercial property and you want to do self-hauling to any other facility, like a community compost facility or a different composting facility than PSDS may use, there are some provisions for self-hauling. Again, you'd be required to maintain records so that we could monitor that. But again, that is an option for you as well. So those are things we wanted to mention. The other thing, the last thing on here was our contact information, but we will be sure to send that around to everybody so that you have that. It's also on both of our websites and probably on letters you have received from us in the past. So, so we'll have that information posted as well. The final thing I wanted to do is I wanted to go to questions. And I have to be completely honest with you, because of the Zoom failure, I have no way to get those questions. So what I'm going to ask you to do is in the chat box, if you can chat a message to Chris Cunningham directly, that's an option for you if you do have a question, or to Tracy Sheldon. Tracy's also on the line with us today, and she's in the office a couple. So if you have a question, you can type it in there. The other thing you can do is take yourself off mute briefly and ask your question. So you're on the honor system, so I can't control you. So does anybody have any questions at this time?
You know what, if you don't mind,
sorry, Patrick, I was just gonna say I can read the questions out, and you know, if you or Chris or myself can address them.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
Okay, let's go ahead. And our first one is from Holly. So the one example of the different ways trash is collected, my community with the closet. Since the HOA isn't responsible for the owner's trash service, will we now have to be, or will that continue to be the owner to get the correct bin?
So it sounds like the question is for those properties, like we said, that are very space constrained and have like closets for their materials, whether or not that is up to the HOA or whether or not it's up to each individual resident to accommodate that the new requirement. So Chris, maybe you can speak to this from maybe a billing perspective, but maybe you can also talk about the 2.5 gallon container option that we talked about.
Yeah, real quick, I'm looking at this one here. So yeah, the HOA isn't responsible for the owner's trash service, but are they responsible for the property, right? The enclosures. If they're not, then yeah, I think, because there's a few areas out here that are really, really tight. They're going to be very difficult to find any space at all. And those are the examples where 2.5 gallon pails are going to be pretty much have to be the service. But I would like to come out and take a look at those as well. So if you could contact us, let us take a look at that. We can mull through that and figure out the details for you.
Yeah, one of the things that we have found so far is that each of these cases is unique. So we really need to come out and take a look, see what you've got, and figure out what the best option is. Because as you mentioned, as the person who had the question mentioned, there can be some different arrangements in terms of HOA management versus individual management, et cetera.
Okay, the next question is from Steven. I'll read. It's a four questions. The first one is, do you have an approved list of facilities that my gardener can use?
So yeah, what we can do is we can post up the list of facilities that are acceptable to transport those organic materials to at this point. And we'll have those on our website along with the commercial and organic and recycling requirements.
Okay, the second question is, how do I comply with documentation when my waste goes on a truck with the rest of for the rest of the day? I'll ask the question. Steven, did you mean your regular trash service or your organics?
Hi, this is Stephen Sullivan.
Yes.
So I have a 7-unit building in Palm Springs with desert landscaping. So truthfully, I think I'm probably under that 5 gallon minimum. But my question is, when my gardener takes everything to the dump, mine goes on the back of the truck with everybody else that he's working with that day. So how do I provide a realistic documentation without completely fabricating it to satisfy some state requirement?
Right. So what we're asking people to do is to collect the dump ticket from that time frame when they were there. So they should be going from your property, maybe to another property or another property.
A dozen properties.
Yeah, exactly. But eventually they're going to end up at the location that they're going. And so if we get a ticket from them that basically documents that your stuff was collected and put onto this truck and taken to this place, the most important part of that equation is the place, quite honestly. So the fact that it gets collected up and married with other things, that's fine, as long as we can have some sense of where it's going.
Okay. So your landscaper will have to get some copies made of that ticket.
Yeah.
Because the neighbors that may have another 10-unit complex and one before that, they're going to have to get the same copy as well.
And is that a state form or is that a city form?
All it is a ticket from the disposal facility.
Okay.
So it's not a form that has to be filled out.
So I currently pay PSDS to have a recycle bin at my facility. Am I also going to be paying now to have an organic bin?
Yes. Yes, it will. It is a requirement. You said you were 7 units. So yeah, it's a state requirement, have to have the organics.
And is there any tenant accountability component to this law and the application?
So you're obligated to provide that container for them. That, again, there's a lot of unknowns to this regulation. It is a tough one. But your obligation is to make sure that they are provided with that container, and then we can provide the education for it. But ultimately, if there is a route review done or lid flipping done and we see contaminants in there, it is the responsibility of the owner to make sure that those things are properly done.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, a lot of good ideas, but I don't
Right.
live on property and I don't police my tenants, and, you know, I'm zero landscape and
Right.
we're small units. I just,
Right.
okay.
Yep, there are a lot of challenging aspects to this particular set of requirements, and I don't really think that the state has thought through all of the questions that are going to come up with regard to it. So we're trying to work through it the best that we can. So, other questions?
Stephen had one more question regarding the number of units on bulk pickup. I can answer you, I can email you, Stephen, or in regards to that, it's not considered single dwelling residence. That's 4 units and down. That's why it's not in that program for bulk pickup. But
Yeah, I was asking about bulk pickup, but I don't want to hold everybody hostage because we're about organics today. But yeah, I think that bulk setup should be revisited. You know, I don't know why residential gets it and commercial, even small units, gets absolutely nothing, not even once a year.
Actually,
but again, we're talking about organics today, so I'm fine with that. You can email me.
actually, yes, they do. Sorry, I don't mean to correct you, Liz, but yeah, they do. It's a limited amount, but there is.
Oh, well, then I want to hear all about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next question was from David. So just a clarification, can you combine organic and yard waste together in the new bin? Also, what color will the organic bin be?
So that is an excellent question. The feedback that we are, so we have 2 scenarios. So if you are a scenario where you are just responsible for collecting your food waste, then you will have a food waste bin. That will be kind of the sole purpose for that bin. And that could be a brown bin, I believe, is food waste only. And then if you are in a situation where you would be combining waste, green waste and food waste, you can do that. We are working out the details of that with our waste management company. Ultimately, Burtech manages the waste that PSDS collects. And so the information that they have given us to date is that they will take combined materials, so green waste and food waste, and they would like for the food waste to be bagged so that eventually they could take that out of the load and take a look at that and put that into their food waste processing. But generally speaking, food waste and green waste could be combined into a particular container, and those would typically be the green containers for on the residential side in particular.
The next question is from Marcia, and I believe we answered this. In a multiple dwelling, if the HOA is responsible, how do you suggest dealing with individual non-compliance?
So I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, sorry. In a multiple dwelling, if the HOA is responsible, how do you suggest dealing with individual non-compliance?
So I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but if you're meaning that if you're in a situation where it's collected in, it's combined in a kind of a community bin, how do you deal with compliance? That is something we would want to work with the HOA on in terms of communications and outreach. We're happy to help with that outreach effort. There is not a individual compliance component to these requirements, except for the property owners and the property manager. So in multifamily settings, I don't know that there is anything in the current law that has us go back to the origin of that material. For example, a specific tenant in a multifamily complex.
So it's the same question.
Hi, Chris.
Stephen raised.
This is Marcia. Hi.
Hi.
My question comes from two places. One is we have several renters on the property, and there's not always good communication between the owners that are renting even our stuff that we're trying to get accomplished. And we also have a couple of people. We have 20 units. There's also a couple of people that don't comply with our regular HOA stuff. So, I'm just concerned about, just asking for any guidance on getting individual people to comply. But I guess you answered it by saying you would come out and do outreach to the community, which I probably will ask you to do. So thank you.
Yeah.
So,
no problem.
yeah, and so I just did want to mention also that I really appreciate the questions. Chris and I do both, because this is really one of the first times we're going in depth on this particular topic, and you guys are probably some of the toughest customers, as it were. And so we really appreciate the questions, and these are the kinds of things that we can take back to our legal team and to the state and say, okay, these are the kinds of questions we're getting. You got any guidance on this? So this is really helpful for us to hear, even though we may not have the best answers for you. So.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yep.
Connie Wynn. So what you're saying is the owners are responsible for compliance of the tenants, but we also cannot evict the tenants for non-compliance. So how are we supposed to do that?
If I can, responsible for providing the correct containers for them. But as far as making sure that every tenant complies with exactly what you want, I mean, we all know that is almost impossible. The only thing we can do is educate right now. And like Patrick said, we're going to have to work with the state and the state's enforcement agency, CalRecycle, who put all these rules in place. Mm-hmm. And we got to bring these questions back and say, hey, how are people supposed to do this? It's very difficult. We know.
Our state is in a severe drought, and I can't get even tenants to call me when their toilet is running so that I can repair it so that we can save water. So I'm not sure how I'm going to get them to put their trash in the proper container. Yeah,
I think the only thing we can do right now is provide the container, make sure they have the proper education. But I mean, it's education. And if it doesn't work, I mean, it's like you said right now, do they even call you when there's a water issue? No, they don't. The frustrations with the state are shared.
Right. And if it makes anybody feel any better, we're going to have a similar situation on the single family residential side, where we're going to be monitoring routes and checking for contamination on routes and things like that. And we may not know where some of that contamination comes from. And so anyway, so we're going to be, it's going to be a learning process for everybody. And again, we're going to have some of these same challenges on the single family side as well.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
This is Haley Preston. I'm the director of Desert Compost and the local community composting organization. Chris, when you were talking about how Palm Springs Disposal Service was going to be providing education, how are you planning on doing that?
We're going to provide each owner with all of the education they need for each and every resident they have. Or spend time on site if they'd like us to, with any residents that want to meet us on site and go over the whole process.
Right. And we're happy to have more of these types of things too, where they're broad webinars so that anybody can tune in and get information. So we'll be working together on that.
Hi, I have a question.
Yep.
This is Barbara. Earlier you mentioned that plastic bags weren't recyclable. And then you talked about the green bins where you want to, where we can combine food waste and green waste, and how the food waste should be bagged. So how do we do that?
So that is an awesome question. And that is something that we have been pushing back on with our provider, Burtec, because it sends a mixed message, right? Just like you observed, is that we're telling people to keep plastic bags out, and now we're telling you to bag your organic waste. And so anyway, so we are still in discussions with them about that particular topic. And so definitely more guidance will be forthcoming on that. And as we learn more about their process and what that means for them and how that should be done. One example that we put forward to them is, could people use paper bags and mix that in? And so anyway, so they were sort of taking that back and thinking about it. And so anyway, so I think more guidance will follow on that, but I agree and I appreciate that you caught that sort of challenging inconsistency that we are somehow going to move forward with. So that is a great point, and we are going to try to provide more guidance on that.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question.
Yep.
We have 15 dumpster enclosures on our property that have a dumpster and 2 to 3 blue recycling bins. All but one of them will have sufficient space to put a green bin in there. Do all 15 have to have a green bin, or can one be eliminated because of a space consideration?
Yeah, my feeling about that is that you, if you are able to provide them in all the other ones, then we can probably accommodate one not having it. So yeah, you're certainly meeting the spirit of the requirement there.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't mean to skip Holly. She said, I feel like that since the law takes effect in 4 months from now, this seems a bit short notice to get communities prepared. I'll let you answer, Patrick.
Sure. So this has been an evolving process in terms of the requirements and the deadlines and understanding of the requirements. The regulations were just finalized at the end of last year, and it takes a lot to understand them and to interpret them for the locality. And so we have been trying to figure things out with the state and with our lawyers and other folks to basically interpret what they're asking for. And so we're still kind of in the learning process, but we wanted to make sure that we were trying to get information out to you guys as soon as we felt comfortable with enough information that was going to be helpful for you and not leave you with a bunch of more questions. So I agree, we probably should have done this a while ago. But we're trying to get you the best information we can as soon as we can get it to you. The other thing is there aren't enforcement requirements for this for another couple of years. So we are really in the education, outreach, compliance mode, getting people on board in the next couple of years. So we are working towards that. We're going to be working with you guys again in that process to understand your needs and get things as in compliance as best we can. And so anyway, so that is another point that's important to mention, is that the potential enforcement of this is really starts to kick in after a couple of years. The state did acknowledge that this is a lot, and so it's going to take a little while for people to get on board. As commercial property, if people are calling in from commercial properties that had organic requirements in the past, then these are things that you probably should have we were trying to work to deal with before this date. So anyway, so I think hopefully it's not such a stretch for so many that compliance is years down the road. So anyway, so I think again we're just kind of trying to interpret and do the best we can with understanding the regs as they are, and the evolving kind of interpretations of what they mean. So yeah, so that's where we are.
The next question is, does the size of the green bin, is it determined by the number of units?
No, it's not. If it is a centrally located bin, so if you have several tenants using the central located bin, it doesn't matter what size it is. We just need to right size it, right? So if you have a smaller complex that only has a 2 cubic yard for trash, so all you need is 1 organics container for some green waste and food waste, you can do that. There's multiple choices there. I think I'm answering that or understanding that right, but if not, then please let me know.
The next question is, what is the cubic feet requirement per each household for green waste? I'm assuming that's the threshold.
So the de minimis quantity threshold is for a particular customer and property. So for example, if your complex has 20 units, then it's for that customer. So those units. And I think that's most of the folks that we're dealing with. So I think that answers your question.
Okay.
Hey, Liz.
Yeah, yes.
There's a question up top, I think from David. I think we missed. So just a clarification, can you combine organic and yard waste together in the new bins? Also, what color will the organic bin be? So yes, you can combine the food waste and green waste together. Now we're still working out some details. So if it's going to be a cart, the 32, 65 or 96 gallon container, it may be a little while down the road before we start that. Unless the facility opens in January, then I think we're okay. But the answer to your question is yes, you will be able to do that, and it will be green.
Yep. So I just wanted to follow up on that last part of what Chris mentioned in terms of the facility opening. So currently we take our organic material to Down Valley, Coachella Valley Compost, and they manage that, turn that into material that's used on agriculture. So, but we are waiting for a facility to open at Edom Hill, which is closer. And it's going to accept combined green waste, food waste. It's going to handle each of those streams separately. And so part of the reason that some of our answers aren't as good as they could be is because that facility has not opened yet. And so we haven't had a lot of experience working with them yet. And depending on when that facility opens, it may dictate some of when we can start some of the service. So that's another factor that's out there that's a little bit of an unknown for us right now. So we're trying to work with that scenario as well.
Okay, the next question is for Patrick. I have a resident in Costa Mesa with waste management as our disposal service. While we have our separate containers for general and green waste, they do not provide recycling bins. Instead, it is sorted at the center that employs the underprivileged. The city says it is a much more efficient than having individuals separate. Has the city entertained this process?
So that is something that we have talked to PSDS about. We've been talking about that in terms of long range planning. For the future, it would be very nice as the city to have a little more control over the waste that we generate, as opposed to sending it to a transfer station where it gets mixed in with everything else. I think we would have probably a better recycling rate if we did that. But we have not gone into any formal discussions about that. But I think that is a great model. And I would love to take a look at that. And I think it said it was Costa Mesa.
Yes.
Okay.
Also,
Yeah,
Glendora also has that model with Athens waste.
Okay, Great.
Yeah, those are considered high diversion facilities.
Great. That's good to know. We'll take a look at that.
Okay, the next question is, can an HOA fine the individual that's non-compliant?
That is a good question. I don't know that we could prevent you from doing that. I think you guys issue fines for lots of different things, parking violations, et cetera. So that would be an interesting idea. And we would certainly might like to know a little bit more about that. The city, I don't think, could issue a fine directly to in that sort of a situation. But certainly the property management company or the property owner could probably do something like that, I would think.
The next question is tied up to this, I think. Most HOAs do not have security to follow someone to see what the unit or what they do, they go. Should they have improperly dumped waste accordingly? Most HOAs use cameras and still cannot identify individuals for compliance.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a question in there, but that is
yeah, I think that, like I
note.
said, it's
Yeah.
the next question is for Chris. What's the additional cost for a new bin?
Well, if it's for, is it for organics and what size? So I think you'll need to let us know exactly.
It does not, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There's a couple questions regarding the price, and I'm assuming this is for organics and the food waste. If you can email myself or Chris, we can go ahead, or I will take the names down and I will email you directly the information, the prices for sizes and everything. And we'll reach out to anybody asking for costs. I will go ahead and reach out to you directly, or all of you.
Yeah. And can you be sure, somebody, Chris, Liz, or Tracy, can you be sure to just put our contact info into the chat box so everybody has that?
Yes,
Yeah,
Tracy added that.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, and we're also working on some of this budget stuff with the city right now. So
Yep.
There's questions I can answer. There's some cost questions I cannot. So just let us know what those questions are, and we'll get you what we have.
The next question is there something on a website I can print out and give to each tenant so they can start to get ready for it?
So there is not anything yet, but that is a good point. We should start to create that. One of our challenges with regard to outreach on this is that we are still trying to figure out the start date and when all of this is going to be in place. And so what we can do is develop something that's more kind of advisory, saying here, here's what's coming, be ready for it, kind of start to separate your material and start to reduce your waste, that kind of thing. So we'll work on that, and that'll be posted to our website, and we'll try to get that out to everybody as well. Just let you know.
Okay. The next question, Nate and Kelly, they asking, can we trade out trash for green waste? So just trading, will it be allowed to trade out percentage of black or brown bin for green bins?
If you're talking about downsizing your trash and upsizing in organics,
yes,
of course, but you still will need trash, because if there's any contamination in any of those with trash, there's going to be a violation or a notice on it. But you could definitely downsize trash and upsize your recycling and your organics.
All right, any other questions? I want to acknowledge our time. We're about 10 minutes over, but we're happy to stay on as long as there's questions from people.
There's quite a bit.
Okay. All right, keep firing away.
I think that is it. There was a last comment. Please let me know if I missed any of the questions. I was scrolling. I believe I've got them all. And again, Chris' contact information is there. I will put my contact information as well. If anybody has any questions, please please email us. We'll be answering those questions. I know they'll come to you eventually.
Right.
And
Great.
let us know.
Great.
Oh,
Thank
okay,
you.
sorry. Yeah, we did
Yeah.
take care of those. Okay.
Great. Thank you all for participating. I did want to mention one more thing that is actually unrelated to waste. It is actually an opportunity for you. And I had a great slide on it. And it has to do with energy efficiency opportunities and incentives for multifamily complexes, the larger complexes. If you're interested in doing more efficient lighting, more efficient energy systems, whatever it may be, look at our website, yoursustainablecity.com. SCE is working with Wyden, which is a consulting and energy consulting firm, to roll out some new incentives for commercial properties of a certain size. And so you may be able to take advantage of some really interesting opportunities and get some of that money back that you've been paying into SCE for outreach programs and incentive programs. So again, take a look at our website for those of you that are at larger properties. You might be able to take advantage of that. So with that, I think that's all I have for everybody today. And again, really appreciate the questions and some of the challenging ones in particular. It really helps us in figuring out what we need to do next and we need to focus some attention. So I would encourage you guys to, if you have additional questions, feel free to send us emails and ask us. Feel free to follow up with PSDS if you want to arrange a site visit and to have us come out and take a look at your property. And again, we will probably have another one of these as we go forward and make sure that the message gets out far and wide. So thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate your participation and your questions, and look forward to working with you, working through this with you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Please call us. Please call me. There's a lot going on here to process. I know there's a whole lot to process. I've been looking at it for 2 years now, and it's still got new stuff in there. So call us, call me up, please.
Right. All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. I can't shut down the meeting, but feel
All
free.
right, thanks a lot, Patrick.
All right.
Can you repeat the website one more time?
Sure. www.yoursustainablecity.com.
Thank you.
You're welcome.